Hello and welcome to our
Hold
parent
on.
council. No, sorry, I think. Hello and welcome to our parent council meeting. I'm Sarah Scott and I'm chair of James Gillespies High School Parent Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. Can I apologise in advance for any technical issues which we might have during the meeting? If you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. We're using Microsoft Teams for the meeting because it's a system which is approved by Edinburgh Council, but it doesn't allow us to be as interactive as some other systems. The only people who can be heard are the presenters, and everyone else attending can write questions only via the Q&A panel, but they can't be heard. I'd like to go through a few brief points before we start. We're aiming for the meeting to last about 1 hour. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening. Bearing that in mind, please don't share any personal information, in particular about children, that shouldn't be shared publicly. This evening we are focusing on SQA assessment arrangements and we'll have a presentation by Bob Shanklin, the Deputy Head Teacher, dealing with this. Before that, I'll give an update on Parent Council work and our Head Teacher, Donald MacDonald, will give his report. At the end, there will be an opportunity for questions. As I said, we can only take the questions via the Q&A panel and the mics won't work for anyone other than the presenters. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators, so if you would like your question to stay private, please say so when you type it in. Can I ask that if you see a question on the Q&A panel that is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat? It will hopefully let us get through more questions and let our presenters concentrate on the most popular ones. The questions will be gathered up at the end and posted together with answers on the Parent Council website, so that even if there is not time to deal with everything tonight, they will be dealt with after the meeting. Before handing over to Donald, here are one or two issues that the Parent Council has been involved with over the last month or so. The City of Edinburgh Council has been consulting on its budget setting for 2021 to 24 in difficult circumstances and with a projected budget shortfall of 47.5 million over those 3 years. Parent councils across Edinburgh together made a deputation today to the Education, Children and Families Committee, raising concerns about the erosion of education budgets over the last few years and the lack of real consultation with schools and parent councils on changes which then have a detrimental effect on school budgets. Another appeal to the council led by parent councils, this time about a prohibition on schools using their delegated budget for staff flu vaccines, which was only brought into force this year after a number of years when this was normal practice, has resulted today in the ban being rescinded. Lobbying has also continued on the resumption of school extracurricular activities through the Active Schools programme. Council COVID rules have meant that activities can only be led by council staff, so parent and volunteer-led activities couldn't go ahead. In practice, this means that most extracurricular activities are not taking place, although a variety of private clubs are able to offer activities, including within school premises. This came again to the Education Committee today, and a motion was passed which would now allow parent volunteers and external coaches to deliver outdoor sports from January, although we remain in level 3. We await further details on how this is to be organised. Finally, I come to financial issues. On behalf of Ros Ingle, our Treasurer, I can report that since the last Parent Council meeting, there has been one payment to us for £131.91, which came in via easy fundraising. The balance of the current account, as at 30th of November, was £3,807.93. We have also completed the annual allocation of our Small Sums Fund, which is a fund raised through Parent Council events, when these were possible, easy fundraising and donations on parent pay up to July 2020 with the aim of providing small-scale support for projects, activities and equipment identified by staff as things that can help them in their work, supporting our children in their education. This year we received 19 applications from various departments around the school to a total value of £8,997.54, whereas our surplus funds available to allocate were £4,231.24. We collaborated with the JGHS Trust in reviewing the applications and are delighted to say that the Trust agreed to fund bids to the value of £1,850 to support projects promoting equity, literacy and support for disadvantaged pupils. The Parent Council was able to cover a number of other applications, although with regret we had to decline to fund a £400 bid from Design and Technology for 2 large pieces of equipment, although their department's remaining bids for equipment and textbooks were part funded. We were thus able to fund other remaining bids, including for reading books, subscriptions for magazines and specialist software, iPads for dyslexic students, and art materials, amongst other things. A full report of how money was allocated is on the Parent Council website, which can be found under the Parents section on the school website. You may have seen the flyer for the Parent Council's current festive fundraising campaign, which was last week. This fundraiser is likely to be the Council's main way of raising money for the scheme this year, and if you're able to support us to support the school in this way, please consider making a donation via Parent Pay. Another way to support our campaign, and at no cost to yourself, is using easy fundraising in your online shopping. You can find further information on all of this on the Parent Council website. A separate events and fundraising group has also been set up to support both social events and funding for larger projects. Details of the group are also on the PC website with its contact email address for anyone who would be interested in taking part in the group's work. And they're working towards an event in spring next year, raising funds for a mental health hub at the school. Thank you for listening to that summary. I'll now hand over to Donald for his report. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I just get the thumbs up if people can hear me? My audio is on. It is, thank you. Well, thanks, Sarah, for your introduction. And I'm in the habit always of saying, welcome everyone to the school. I appreciate that we used to have Parent Council meetings in our school library. But here I'm sitting in my conservatory at home. We just turned into an office for the last 9 months and adapting to this way of working. I'd like to give a brief overview then of some key points reflecting some of the pre-questions that perhaps came into Parent Council they asked me to respond to, but also 1 or 2 other things I think that are topical and are important. First of all, COVID arrangements. Our COVID arrangements have been pretty consistent over the last 16 weeks or so since we resumed in August. Consistency helps. Running a school with routines really does help and makes a difference. And I do think that's played a large part in us having a relatively small number of positive cases. We've had 6 pupil cases in total and a member of staff some weeks ago. Excuse me. We've had no pupil cases in the last 5 weeks. So long may that continue. Whenever I say something like that, there's always somebody, my wife included, who say you're tempting fate now by saying that. So hopefully not. And that brings me nicely on to test and trace during the holidays. You'll have received a letter from me yesterday, which covered the arrangements during the holidays. The arrangements are intended to try and give school staff a bit of a break from doing the test and trace during holiday period. So in the event that there is a positive case, it will be staff from out with the school who will be contacting families. And to facilitate the tracing, we'll be asking pupils in the last 2 days of this week, and Monday, Tuesday next week, to make a note of those who would be considered contacts for them. And pupils will be supported with that. Excuse me. I'm in a cold room here. When I've moved to a colder room, it affects my asthma, so just bear with me as I cough and splutter a little bit, but there's nothing too sinister, I can assure you. There's a few things I do want to mention, just reflecting really on the past year since we've resumed. One of the biggest impacts that we've had is school trips and excursions. When I was asked to report on that recently to our HQ about how many trips, etc., would cancel since March, we're in the order of 200 trips and excursions. It's quite considerable. And so really for new pupils, and indeed pupils who have been with us a while, that will have impacted on them because it really does enrich their experience and gives, I think, a much wider, rich education to the academic and school-based experience we offer. So without a doubt, COVID-19 and restrictions has impacted hugely on our school. And of course, at this time of year, we would be preparing for, and may well have had, our Christmas concert, which at Gillespies is a major event with, including our P7 youngsters. We would have anywhere up to 800 performers at the Usher Hall. I missed that this year, and I think the the pupils do too, and it's an opportunity for so many of our pupils to showcase their undoubted talents. Excuse me. One or two other things. Families have been in touch in the last few days about what's happening at the end of this week and also next week. It's classes as normal. There'll be some Christmassy events, but very much low key, and in no way reducing the various mitigations that we have in place. In regard to mitigations, parents had got in touch with me a month ago, inquiring and seeking consistency about spraying of desks. And I'll just share with you that we have asked all staff to ensure that desks are sprayed when pupils have left the desks, so the desks are essentially empty. They're then wiped when pupils arrive. So we've aimed to do that because we appreciate that one or two youngsters may have been affected by being too close to the spray. So I want to be upbeat as well and positive. There is genuinely much to look forward to 2021. I look forward to returning to normality, whatever that means. I do believe, to use probably a phrase that's being well used now, a new normality. It's going to be new. It's probably going to be different. But school trips, as I mentioned, foreign excursions, extracurricular activities, as Sarah referred to, including sport and music, they're a huge part of the Gillespies experience, and we miss them. That having been said, I do want to turn to the main item for discussion tonight, and I want to give as much time as possible to that. If there are items that you'd like me to comment on, please raise these in the Q&A. So the main item tonight is SQA arrangements and how we will support S4, 5 and 6. I am reminded of something I used to say to all my new physics classes when I was more classroom based. I used to say to them that please bear in mind that there are more questions than answers in this world. That was my get out clause, because I had some really bright sparks who would ask me the most incredible questions about black holes and expanding universes and so on, and many questions I couldn't answer, but I would go off and explore. In some ways, I feel a wee bit of sympathy for Bob Shanklin tonight, who's going to be asked questions about SQA for which we don't have answers yet. But Bob will, and we will, note down queries and questions that you have, and we will address these, and we'll learn from the feedback and the suggestions that you make. This is uncharted territory for us. It was only a week ago that Highers and Advanced Higher exams were cancelled. So we're responding to that, process the information. We know many of the questions, but genuinely we don't have all the answers yet. But I'd want you to have confidence in us that we will have answers to these, and we'll find the best way of supporting all our pupils over the coming months. And I am an eternal optimist, and I would say that there is always a best solution, and we will find that. And I know that Bob is very solution focused, and I know he's looking forward to the challenge of managing all of this in the coming months. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Bob Shanklin now, and I'll sit back and we'll take questions later on. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me along to your meeting tonight, and thank you to Mr. MacDonald for a very optimistic start to proceedings, and so it should be. Indeed, there will be challenges to come with SQA business, but also a lot to be excited about in the future, about facing these challenges and trying to overcome them. What I would like to do tonight is to run through a presentation which has been emailed out to all S4, S5 and S6 parents earlier on today, and just to try, because it broadly covers the main points which I think people will want to know about. Those being, of course, how our SQA courses this year are really going to be assessed. A specific bit of time talking about evidence gathering, because as many of you know, that will be pretty important now, given the announcements that have been made, especially the one last week, and then a small section just talking about young people with alternative assessment arrangements. And so what I'm going to do is I am just going to share my screen, and hopefully all the technology will work well, and you'll be able to see my presentation, and I'll just talk through that. So can I just check, is that all on everyone's screen? Mr. MacDonald, could you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Great. Thanks. So this document, which I've emailed out, also sits on the school's website under the exams and assessments menu, which is within both the parents and the pupils section. Now, the design of this document is meant to be a working document so that when information and updated information comes out from the SQA, I will update the sections within this document so that we have a live document that gives the most up-to-date information that we have. So as I say, the first thing I would like to discuss really is just what the SQA are proposing as being the approaches to overall course assessment this year. And the easiest way to do that is to first of all break the subjects down into 3 categories. So we've got internally assessed qualifications, National 5 qualifications, and then higher and advanced higher qualifications. So first of all, internally assessed qualifications, the one that I like the most because it has changed the least. This is really just the same kind of approach to assessing these qualifications as we have had in previous years. So this includes qualifications like National 3, National 4, some National Progression Awards, that we offer in some subjects, and also if young people are doing national qualifications but not doing the whole award, they might just be doing some units within a national qualification. So internally assessed, I mean, there's really it does exactly what it says on the tin. But these are qualifications that have always been assessed by assessments that we deliver and are given to us by the SQA and are delivered in school. And the approach to these qualifications hasn't changed this year, apart from the fact that there has been some slight modifications that have been made to some of the courses. And as you'll see, I've put a link here in the document, which takes you to a section of the SQA website, where you can search and find the different qualifications and look at those modifications. That being said, I don't necessarily think that process is particularly required, because teachers will guide the students in these qualifications through exactly what it is that they need to do, as they do every year. And as I say, it's all assessments which are sat in school. Then that moves us on to the 2 groups where, of course, there has been the greatest amount of change for this year. So firstly, for National 5 qualifications, which are predominantly sat by our students who are in S4, but we also have S5 and S6 candidates who sit National 5 qualifications. So through an announcement in October, we learned that the Scottish Government and the SQA had made the decision to cancel exams, or really what I should say is cancel all external assessment for these courses, because these courses are normally assessed through a final exam and also by coursework, which is packaged and sent to the SQA, assessed by their appointees, and then those marks then contribute with the exam to the final grade. But this year for National 5s, there'll be no external assessment of coursework, and obviously there'll be no final exam. There also, and it's worth bearing this in mind, there's also been quite a few modifications made to National 5 courses this year, and that is only for this year at the moment. And again, that is due to the conditions in which we are working currently with the COVID pandemic, but also in reflection of the conditions that young people have been working in the lead up to starting this academic year, you know, with lockdown and all the challenges that brought as well. And essentially these courses will now be assessed through the gathering of evidence, which happens within assessment activities within school. And then from this, teachers, teaching staff within the school have now been asked by the SQA to provide, and I suppose the language around this is quite important, provisional course results, which have to be communicated to the SQA as an absolute final deadline by Friday, the 28th of May. Now, when these effectively will have to be done, more from a logistical process, will be quite significantly ahead of that date, due to the moderation that will be required to do of all of these results. And only last week, when we got the announcement from the Deputy First Minister Mr. Swinney around the cancellation of the higher and advanced higher exams, we also received at that same time a bit more detail about this exact assessment process that the SQA have put in place for National 5, and moderation is a key part to that. So the gathering of assessment evidence, which is then moderated at a number of different levels. So moderated at school level. So I, for example, as SQA coordinator, will be doing a lot of work in looking at the results, which we have as a school level, along with Mr. MacDonald, and then comparing them with previous results and doing various things to make sure that the performance is in line really with previous years. And then there is an expectation from the SQA that the local authority will also be involved in moderation, and then the SQA themselves are also going to be involved in moderation, and that process is going to run all the way from January all the way through April into May. How the SQA are going to moderate the work that we're doing in schools to gather evidence is at certain points of the year they're going to sample the evidence, and ultimately the judgments that school staff are making about that evidence, and then give feedback to schools to then take further action from that point. Also, when we submit our estimates on the 28th of May, as I say, they're called provisional estimates or provisional course results. The SQA are then go through a process of looking at these results, and will then feed back to schools and to local authorities potentially, if there are any points that raises that they wish to have further discussion about. With regards to the exactitude of that process, we don't really know yet, but I'm sure a lot of this information is still to come. On this presentation, this tab here, was National 5 results in 2021, takes you through in a wee bit more detail exactly how this process that's been proposed for National 5 works. In fact, I think I have that in a tab here. And as I say, the information that is here is specifically for parents, to give a kind of broad outline as to how this new assessment model is going to work for National 5. And I would really encourage everyone to have a look at that. Now, the second link, which is in my document here, is actually a link to another page on the SQA website, which gives a really, really helpful portal to getting subject specific information for all our different courses. I've got that in a different tab here. So let's say, for example, you're at home and you're wanting to support your children at home about preparing for the different bits of content or assessments, for example, for different courses. If you go to the National Qualifications subject page, then by clicking on that, you then get a breakdown of all the different courses which are offered by the SQA. You can then click on that, and that will take you to the subject specific pages for those courses, and you can find out loads of different information then. And again, another important aspect to that is any modifications that have been made to the courses this year. Now, again, all candidates, all students within the school will be really aware of all the different modifications which have been made for this year, due to the fact that will be talked about in classes. But again, for you as parents wanting to support your young people, you may want to delve into these pages and have a wee bit of a look there about arrangements. One caveat I would give to that, though, as we come on to talk now about higher and advanced higher courses, is that some of the national qualification pages still have a fair bit of updating to be done by the SQA regarding what their new arrangements for higher and advanced higher are going to be. And of course, we're talking about new arrangements for higher and advanced higher because of the fact that this time last week, we had an announcement from the Deputy First Minister also about the cancellation of higher and advanced higher exams for 2021. Now, obviously, that's an announcement that comes at a difficult time, because we're a good chunk through the academic year, and obviously we have lots of plans in place already. And I personally, as SQA coordinator, had lots of plans in place in preparation for final exams that we're going to be sat for these courses. But now we adapt, and are now looking at what can be done to make sure that all our young people that are sitting these courses have a fair assessment of what they've done so far this year, and of course will continue to do for the rest of the academic year. The information around the exact alternative model for certification for higher and advanced higher is the detail is not with us at the moment. So as this announcement was only made last week, we don't have any specific guidance from the SQA yet, and definitely not guidance on a course by course basis. But what we have been told by the SQA is that the model for certification will broadly follow that which has already been published for the National 5 courses. It is looking like at the moment that the deadline for the submission of what I assume will be provisional course awards, like I've described for the National 5 courses, will be also the 28th of May, although I do believe that there is some debate around that currently with teaching unions about the possibility of potentially being able to extend that deadline maybe a wee bit further for higher and advanced higher. But the mood music, which appears to be coming out from the SQA at the moment, is that expect and prepare for the fact that the deadline for submission for those provisional, as I say, I'm assuming there will be provisional course awards, it will also be the 28th of May. One additional thing to bear in mind with higher and advanced higher is that there are still plans currently, and this may change, but there are still plans currently that there will be some supplementary coursework which will in some courses, not all courses, but some courses, that will contribute to the final grade for some as I say, for some courses, but that will not be externally assessed by the SQA. That will be internally assessed by teachers within schools. So as I say, and you can see the bullet points there in the presentation, we still don't have the specific course by course details, but that I am being told is to follow. I think the phrase that was coming from the SQA was that work is apace to try and get this information out to schools, and obviously I am as anxious as I'm sure you are to try and get as much of that information as soon as we possibly can, to help guide us in the coming months as to best preparing our young people for certification in these courses. Again, there's the links that I have here in the document. One is really a basic comment from Fiona Robertson, the Chief Executive of the SQA, just around the Deputy First Minister's announcement last week. And then again, that's the same link from earlier on, which just takes you to the subject-specific pages where you can find out a bit more information about what's being asked for in each subject. But as I said earlier, a bit of a caveat on that one, that there still is a large amount of updating to be done by the SQA on the specific nature of the guidance for each higher and advanced higher course. Now what I want to do is come on and talk a little bit about evidence gathering, because obviously for our National 5 courses, we've known, for a little bit of time now that the evidence gathering is going to be obviously massively important in the assessment of these courses, and of course we are now learning that this is going to be massively important as well for higher and advanced higher courses. So I'll talk firstly about National 5 courses because we've got a bit more information around that. So from October, we started to get some information, I would say broad information in October and the start of November around how the SQA would like us to approach gathering evidence, and then throughout November and just finishing off at the start of December, we were getting the subject specific guidance around evidence gathering. Now, in broad terms, what the SQA want schools and centres to do this year is to gather between 2 and 4 pieces of quality evidence for each candidate throughout the academic year. What that word quality means varies from subject to subject, and some of the subject requirements are quite different in how you generate and gather that evidence. And what gathering that evidence does is then give teachers and schools a portfolio of evidence for every candidate that they can then reflect on and judge, essentially, what course award they feel that candidates are deserving of based on that evidence. Now, I think it's important to stress that, you know, we are talking here between about 2 and 4 different pieces of evidence that are gathered throughout the academic year. There is no one piece of evidence that will be of greater significance necessarily than another, although some pieces of evidence do offer a greater predictive value than others do. But ultimately, everything that a young person does in their classes does contribute to, I suppose, a holistic picture of how they are coping and working within these classes, and ultimately how well they can attain. Now, as I say, there has been quite a bit of general advice about gathering assessment evidence. The link here in my document takes you to this page on the SQA website, which talks a lot about this general process for gathering evidence. This document here, the guidance on gathering evidence and producing estimates, is again a good read, and well worth delving into, just to kind of look at the general principles behind gathering evidence and making judgments on that. There's also an SQA Academy course, which is in this link here, which all teachers look at, which talks about how you quality assure evidence and judgments that you make on this evidence to make sure that we have consistency within departments and schools, across schools in Edinburgh, and then of course across schools, schools across the whole nation, which of course is a difficult task, but that's also a task which the SQA are supporting us with through the information that they shared last week with us around their new model for certification. So the different assessment activities which are done in courses varies from subject to subject, and again that is quite dependent on the subject specific advice that we've been given by the SQA around what they feel for each course, what pieces of evidence they feel hold the greatest predictive value. Most of the time for our National 5 courses, we are projecting that a lot of this evidence will be generated in class time. But there are some exceptions to that. There will be times when evidence gathering will have to be done out with the class time, and maybe for extended periods of time. If you think, for example, about some of the requirements of some of our practical courses like art and physical education and music, obviously some of the requirements for those courses and the different skills that are being tested in those courses don't necessarily fit very well into a 55-minute or an hour period. So we need to give time aside to these departments to make sure that they can collect evidence that they need in the right way. And of course, for a lot of these subjects, especially our practical subjects, we've been faced with very difficult situations this year, and the way that they can teach due to the restrictions that we have to work under with COVID. So it's a difficult picture in evidence gathering there, and we need to make sure that we give sufficient time over for that. Also, in some other, I would say, slightly more academically classroom-based subjects, we may also look at some extended assessments possibly later on in the year, because some of these subjects also, the guidance for these subjects also would like to see evidence which is generated in a way which kind of mimics what the final exam would normally be. Now, what we're doing currently is we're gathering exactly what the different assessment activities that different departments would like to do will be, and we're going to share this with parents as soon as we possibly can. Now, in my presentation, I've said in January, I'm hopeful that I might be able to share a first draft of this document before Christmas, because I know everyone will be very keen to see what kind of different assessment activities will be coming up. Obviously, this has been a wee bit of a spanner in the works with the announcement last week, because we now also have to have assessment activities for higher and advanced higher, and so there's a wee bit of moving around of things to try and make sure that we can fit everything into the time that we have left in the academic year. But as I say, there's a lot of work going into that currently, and I'm hopeful that I'll be able to share a document with all parents, say, before we finish up for the Christmas break. If not, it would be very early after we return in January. that leads me on then to talking about higher and advanced higher. And again, like Mr. McDonald was saying in his introduction, this is definitely the area where there's probably more questions than there is answers currently, given how recently the announcement was about the cancellation of exams. But as I said earlier, we're being told currently that the assessment model for hires and advanced hires will be broadly the same as it is for National 5s. So again, talking about probably having between 2 and 4 pieces of evidence that we can reflect on to look at making judgments and making judgments from. Now, one thing that we're doing slightly differently for hires and advanced hires is that we are going to run a formal prelim diet, or I should say a formal assessment diet in January. Partly that's because the organisation for that was already in place, given that the exams were only cancelled a week ago, but also that this will help us to gather some very useful pieces of evidence through doing these assessments. I will call them formal assessments now rather than prelims, because they're not really preliminary to any exam, and I think it's important to make that distinction. Now, within this assessment, within this presentation, I've got the schedule for these assessments just below, which is here, and as you'll see, these run from Monday the 18th of January through to Friday the 29th of January, and cover all courses that we offer at higher and advanced higher level. Now, there's quite a lot of specific detail that is still to come out to candidates for this around specific rooms, and I'm sure you can imagine that this year, working under the restrictions that we are, that the rooming and the logistical organisation around formal assessments like this year is pretty challenging. But all of that is actually in place. It's just final changes and final bits of just looking over and making sure that all is well with that is being done. And as I say, that will be shared first and foremost with candidates, so that they can see where they're going to be at the specific times that their exams are on, and that will be done well ahead of the 18th of January, so that they've got plenty of time to know where they're going and when they're going, and what will be expected of them in these assessments. Okay. Also, just to bear in mind when thinking about these assessments, any young people where teachers have made requests that they have alternative assessment arrangements, so for example, like the use of a computer for their exam, or an extra time entitlement due to a learning need, for example, that's all factored into these assessments. And Mr. Cockcroft, our head of sport for learning, I was speaking with him before producing this presentation, and he's saying that all details of what alternative assessment arrangements will be coming out this week to parents, so that you can look over that, and then if there's any issues with that at all, obviously just let us know, and then we can make adjustments. Also, of course, when trying to fit in all the courses that we have into this 2-week period, it's always a bit of a challenge. What I would say to all parents and to all candidates is that if there are particular problems which comes up with the actual distribution of the assessments throughout the 2-week calendar, please do share these with me, and we can look to try and make any adjustments if we need to. What I would say though is all of these assessments are done and arranged in a way that fits in with normal SQA assessment guidelines. So, for example, if there are 2 assessments that a student has to sit within a day, these don't exceed the maximum time allowance that the SQA set, and that there is also always the minimum amount of time in between exams. All these things are taken into consideration when putting together a diet of formal assessments like this. Whew, that was a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. So what I would do now is that's really all the information that I wanted to cover today. As I say, I've covered a lot there and I'm sure there are lots of questions, so I want to obviously give a wee bit of time to try and answer those questions. So I'll just hand back and then, as I say, answer questions from there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Bob, for your presentation, and thank you everybody for all the questions we've received. We need to get through as many of them as we can by about 8 p.m. and all the unanswered questions, in fact all the questions will be captured and posted online on our website with answers as soon as we can after the meeting. So I'll hand back to Donald now.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks also to Bob. So the questions, as Sarah has mentioned, they appear certainly on our screens in a Q&A section there, and I hope it's the same for other people. What I would like to do by way of filtering, if I select the questions initially that have 8 or more likes, but rest assured that regardless of the number of likes, we will respond to all of them, and we will place these in the Parent Council section of the school website as soon as. It normally takes a week or so to process that. So I'm just going to begin at the top and 8 or more. First one that catches my eye then is a question on exams this academic year. Youngsters, particularly boys, are known to make a huge leap in the months from prelims to proper exams. What can be often as big as a C to an A. With school assessments, only how is that factored in appropriately? I'm going to bring in Bob at that point. It is something we're aware of, just to reassure you as well. And Bob, we have experience of this last year when schools essentially were closed in March, and this became a fairly extensive exercise in doing this. So Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Donald. I think there's an important distinction that needs to be made this year with the arrangements that have been given by the SQA to date, and I kind of always have to say that and caveat with all kind of SQA guidance at the moment, is that last year when we were making judgments, we could look at what was called inferred attainment. So we could actually say, because we had to lock down and we didn't have all the evidence that we would like to have at that time, we could infer what somebody would likely have achieved in the future. That concept of inferred attainment has been removed very much from all the guidance that the SQA have given so far. So it is all evidentially based. The judgments that are made by schools this year has to be evidentially based. So coming to the question, ultimately what we have to do as a school is to make sure that there are extra assessment activities available later on in the year, in addition to the prelim diet, the formal assessment diet. It's going to take me a while to get used to that. The formal assessment diet, which is there for higher and advanced higher, and of course all the assessment activities which are being planned for National 5 courses as well. Really, it is about making sure that we do enough assessment activities so that there is enough coverage of the course, and enough opportunity for young people to take that learning and be able to show that they have that learning in an assessment activity. So ultimately what we're talking about is assessment activities later on in the year. So there is not just one activity that any young person will do which will determine what their overall course or provisional course award will be. It's about giving, I suppose, a number of opportunities for them to display that knowledge.
Okay, thanks Bob. If I can move on, just scrolling down. Next question, which I'll respond to. What is the school's plan to assist the S4 and probably the S5 and S6 pupils dealing with the incredible amount of stress they are now under with key assessments, etc. And I know this is not helped by the constant, probably well-meaning reminders by teachers of how important these assessments are. I'm very concerned about the impact this is having on their mental well-being. Thank you for raising that question. And I have no doubt that teachers and parents, that we do keep reminding pupils about how important these exams are. And really what we're doing is probably expressing in that way, probably our own stresses and anxieties and trying to get the best from our youngsters. We really ought to stop doing that, and I say that as a parent and as a head teacher. I do fall into that trap, and I keep reminding them how important this is, and of course unwittingly we're adding to their stress levels. Later on, there's also a question about what we're doing to support teachers. They're all linked together. I think that pupils and staff, we are under far more stress than normal. Of that there is no doubt. The lack of certainty, the lack of clarity is contributing to this. In pre-COVID years when there were exams, this was always a stressful time for pupils. Some get far more stressed than others. I know that some pupils are rejoicing in there being no exams this year. It has reduced stress levels for them. That having been said, stress is here, we have to manage it. And I think being aware of it and being mindful of the language that we use and not perhaps offloading our own stresses and our own worries to our charges will probably help. Beyond that, I'm sure, as Bob has alluded to, having a plan in place will help. And the planning in place, in a sense, I'm going to mention one or two of the other questions that have come up, that other state schools they had already planned their diet of assessments and exams. Some had it out a month ago. Well, they're all having to redo it now. With the announcement last week, they're having to change all of that because the hires and the advanced hires not having exams is going to have a massive impact. So yeah, planning, etc. We will find a best solution. So we're aware then of the stresses that are there. But I would also say that if there are youngsters that you're particularly concerned about, we do now have a school counsellor who can help, and that is proving an effective service. So it's reassuring as well. I mean, we put huge store, we tell them this is your, life changing and this is really important. You know what? At the end of the day, it isn't. It's one set of exams, and there'll be many, many more exams or non-exams or assessments. Gosh, learning is going to be happening through their lives, and if they don't quite happen to make it this year, they'll be next year and the year after. Although it will be easier for them in terms of getting to that next stage, whether it be employment, college, university, whatever, if they are successful. In a sense, we're conditioned to them getting these grades and going on, but just reassure them that please do their best, just do your best. And we will love you and support you unconditionally, regardless of how you do. And that is really important that they know that. They do their best, and we can ask no more. Some will do fantastically well, and others perhaps will do less well. But our support and our love for them is unconditional, and that's really, really important to know that. So many people go on and are successful in life not having had a hugely successful experience in school. So let's not overemphasize the importance of it. It's a beginning. I can move on and pick up on one or two other questions. There's a specific maths question, and Bob will know that's going to come to him. What proportion of the provisional course results for National 5 assessment will be placed on the prelim results, which pupils have recently started, e.g. in maths? Bob, over to you on that one. You've touched on that already, but perhaps just to recap more on that one.
Thanks, Donald. Ultimately, the question is asking about a percentage, and there is no answer to that. There is no given percentage that will be attributed to any one test. Now, if a member of staff has said that this counts for X amount of your final grade, then I would like to know about that, because I obviously need to have a bit of a chat with that member of staff, because that ultimately is not how the overall assessment of these courses works. It is about gathering a portfolio of evidence, and that then holistically all contributing to a judgment that would be made about the standard that evidence meets. And that, of course, would be a moderated standard. So a standard where the SQA would look potentially at sampling that evidence and seeing that the standard that we think it reaches is the same as the standard that the SQA believe it to be, and also the local authority doing that as well. I understand that sometimes when teachers are talking to young people about these assessments, that potentially some things can get lost in translation, because some assessments will cover, for example, a certain percentage of the course, and that then can lead people to believe that that means that that would count for a certain percentage of their final grade, because ultimately all assessment activities which are sat need to cover as much of the course as possible in their totality, but that would be all the assessment activities together, not one specific assessment. So as I say, if there's any specific concerns there around things that are being said, I would like to know about that, so that we can help everyone to sing ultimately from the same hymn sheet. At the same time, in the defence of all members of staff, you know, we are working with guidance that we have had for very, very short periods of time, and trying to do the best. And you know, as Donald was saying in his last answer there as well, about not trying to put too much pressure on the students. I know that is really difficult for teachers as well, because at the same time, it's always a very fine balance between wanting people to understand the significance of something that you're doing and not also trying to put too much pressure on them, because ultimately a lot of these things do have a significance, and you can ignore that. They do have a significance, but again, as I say, it's a difficult balance sometimes to reach. And of course, every teacher thinks their subject's the most important, and you know, maths teachers, I can say that for myself because I am a maths teacher, can be bad for that. Cheers.
Thanks, Bob. And can I move on to the next one? With the final exams now cancelled, this has turned the prelims into key exams. So now pupils have their most important exams much sooner. In a sense, Bob had covered this in his presentation earlier. The prelim, or rather the assessment that we're having in January, is but one of a number of assessments that will take place. We feel it's important to give pupils the opportunity, the experience of sitting in that environment. It's one of the pieces of evidence we will use, and as more and more clarification comes from the SQA, we'll be clear as to what the relative weightings will be. So rest assured that whilst it will give useful feedback to the pupils as to what standard they're currently at, it will not be the only source of evidence or the most influential piece of evidence. There will be other items of evidence that we will use, allied to the full knowledge that we know that there are youngsters who really kind of apply themselves and really improve markedly in the latter weeks, months of the course. We know that happens. Moving on from that, the teachers are continually assessing and gathering evidence. Can we be told what level our child is currently at? I wish there was a really simple way of doing this. We'd love to have an online tracking system that parents could log into and access where exactly youngsters are at. I would suggest, in the absence of that currently, that please have that conversation with your youngster. Homework assignments, class tests, etc. They offer clues as to how they're doing. And youngsters, and the advice that they're getting and the feedback from teachers, they'll have a pretty clear idea in terms of how they're performing. I have a daughter currently in S6, so I have discussions with her about how she's doing. So I get most of the information. When assessments go well, I get less information when they don't go quite as well. But it's dynamic and it's changing. But certainly in the case of S5 and S6, the exams that we're running starting from the 18th of January will give useful information. Those who do really well in it's a big boost for them. Those who don't do quite as well, they'll need to then refocus and change or work harder on various topics. Allied to that, will they have formal assessments in April and May as well, or will the prelims be the only exam style assessments? In response to that, and I know that advice from the SQA is evolving all the time. If you'd asked me this particular four weeks ago in the context of science, the advice very much was, what we really need to do is have a formal assessment covering as much of the course as possible, and really replacing exams by exams. So let's not forget that what the SQA has done is to have cancelled exams. what then would be perhaps the easy solution is for us as a school, let's replace them with exams, but it will be different exams to other schools and so on and so forth. So it's not as simple as that. So yes, there will be further assessments. And just briefly, Bob, I don't know if you want to say anything about what these assessments might look like later on in the year. And that's a bit of crystal ball gazing, I suppose, because I know that advice is evolving. Any further thoughts on what I've said there, Bob?
I mean, obviously, planning for higher and advanced higher courses, given the announcement only being last week, is still in its infancy, and looking at how these can fit into the timelines that we already have established. But what I would say is that there probably will be scope. I mean, I know the question was talking specifically about April and May. I mean, just to give you an idea, I was actually I'm part of a City of Edinburgh Council SQA working group, and we were talking a lot about this today, about ultimately what dates and what dates can you really run up to gathering evidence to still have enough time to be able to do all the other things that you have to do with regards to moderation before a 28th of May deadline. So what I would say is that I think there can be all sorts of different assessment activities still being done in April and May. These could be in-class assessments. These could also potentially be, exam style assessments, like kind of mock type assessments. These kind of things could well happen. I suppose that the difficulty and the generality that has to come from an answer about this is because some subjects are way more specific about the type of evidence that they hold high predictive value to compared to other subjects. So some subjects push you essentially down a line of having to recreate what a final assessment would normally look like to gain evidence which they deem to be of a high predictive value, whereas other subjects don't have that same type of requirement. So there is not going to be one specific type of activity that will suit all subjects the best. It would not be like, for example, the best thing would not necessarily be to let's run another full diet of formal assessments for every subject, because one, I think we would be moving into the realms of over-assessment, and also that would not necessarily be the best thing for some specific subjects, although it might be for others. So it's about making the right decisions for the right subjects, essentially.
Thanks, Bob. The theme of stress and pressure recurs through many of the questions, and probably just to add to what I've said earlier, I always have a key role to play in this, in that I want to be calm, I want to be reassuring, and reassuring our young people that it will be okay in the end. I know that's easy to say, but I want to say that to all our parents as well. These are stressful and uncertain times, but please continue to reassure, stay calm, take a step back, and there will be this uncertainty and so on and so forth. That does in itself add to the stress, but stay calm and be as reassuring as you can be. And if you as a parent are feeling stressed, there's something that really is bothering you, can I ask you that you direct the question to us in the school, and try as best you can to I suppose protect the youngsters. Teenagers, I think they're under more stress and pressure than ever before, and of course the current state of play with the exams being cancelled, etc. They will pick up that we're stressed as parents and picked up the stress that we're as teachers, and if we can manage that ourselves, it will go some way. But I think recognising that we're stressed is the first step towards that. On a different theme, if I may, what will happen during the period of time, end of April, May, when 4, 5 and 6 would normally have been on exam leave? Will they just attend school throughout? I don't know the answer to that at the moment. I really don't. The announcement last week has given us food for thought. One thing I will share with you to share some of the thinking. We had anticipated that hires and advanced hires would go ahead as normal. And normally we try and finish these courses, the teaching of the courses, beginning of March, middle of March by the latest. I think that last year with COVID related and the lockdown, teachers probably have got through the courses a bit more quickly. So courses probably will be completed in terms of the teaching of them by the end of February. Not in all cases, but in some. That does release quite a bit of time in terms for carrying out the assessments that Bob has spoken about. S6, for example, I suspect that we will need them to be in for some of that time to carry out further assessments. I think it would be unfair if we didn't. We want to give them every opportunity to demonstrate that they've reached the standard that are needed. But I don't have a definitive answer on that, and I know that other schools don't either. I was in discussion with two other head teachers today, one of a local state school, another a local independent school, and we were talking about some of these issues. And we don't know the answer to that yet, but we will have answers to it in the coming weeks, so that it brings a bit of certainty to it. And then there are various options which we'll pursue, but I would like a bit of time to think through the various options and also to consult and think more widely about that. Continuing down the way, thank you for the question about arrangement to support teachers to cope with extra work. There was talk, government, that there were two things that were mentioned. One was extra pay. I don't think, I mean, that the teachers, I genuinely don't think that is going to make much difference. To be honest, I think that those in this whole process that might benefit most from extra pay would be the lowest paid staff, the office staff who are doing all the extra admin. If there was extra pay going, I'd really want them to receive that. And of course, that's not to say that teachers, we would all welcome some extra remuneration. I think what teachers need more of is time. Mention was made of directing in-service days towards SQA related work. Well, we have 2 in-service days left. There's one beginning of January, which had already been targeted and planned for, and there's one further day in May. I'm hoping that some additional time will be made available for teachers to undertake some of the work that's needed. But I haven't heard any more detail on that. I do think it's time that's needed. Pay remuneration may be part of it, but I'm not picking up from teachers that that's going to be a huge motivator for them. What they really want to do is they need clarity, they need time to do this properly so that every youngster in our care is going to be fully and well supported.
Donald, we've just passed 8 o'clock there, and the question and answer panel has been closed now. Do we want to maybe take 1 or 2 more questions and then catch up with other ones in the document later on?
Yes, happy to do that, Sarah. Are there 1 or 2 that you'd particularly like me to home in on? I think the criterion of 8 have probably been through all of these, but happy to direct, if you'd like to direct me to any ones that you feel are recurring or are more important.
That's a very good question. I don't know, has Bob seen any that perhaps he thinks are more pertinent or that he thinks need to be answered this evening?
Yeah, one or two actually caught my eye. There was one, which of course I now can't find, but there was one which was asking about the ranking of students in the estimation process. And that caught my eye because that was really something that I probably should have mentioned in my presentation, which I didn't. And in the SQA guidance that we've been given to date, there is no ranking required. So that ranking element to the estimation process is not there. That would be predominantly because the SQA are stating that there is no form of algorithm being added or applied to results which come from a school, so therefore there is no ranking required because it's the ranking that helps with that algorithm. So it is ultimately the grade and band which is being asked for, and as I say, with the caveat of that is what the information that we have at the moment. But no, there's not going to be any rank required there. And again, because we are basing these estimates purely on the evidence that we have. So again, it's not about judging students collectively because you're inferring attainment. It is about basing your judgment on the actual hard evidence that you have for each particular student. And I'm sure there are probably other ones there. Again, a good question, and was here where it says, my daughter had a very bad start to this academic year, and summative assessment results were averaging around 15%, but she's mainly had A's before. Does this now kind of basically shoot her chances of being able to attain top grades? Absolutely, categorically, it does not shoot her chances of being able to attain good grades. I like to describe the model for certification at the moment as a kind of non-fatalistic. It's a non-fatalistic approach to judging evidence. There is no one thing that should happen that should then prove absolutely fatal to the chances of there being able to be further improvement. So what I would say there is that a key aspect to the guidance which has come out from the SQA around National 5 judgments, which again we're imagining is going to be broadly similar for higher and advanced higher, is that as the year progresses, statistically, young people normally begin to do better. So therefore, giving opportunities for further assessment activities later on in the year will give people the opportunity to show an understanding or a greater understanding than maybe they were able to do in the earlier part of the year. So absolutely not. If you've had a poor start to the year, that does not shoot your chances of being able to improve on that. It's almost a general rule for life, really, that one.
Thanks, Bob. There's a question that I'd like to pick up on, and it's regarding the comparisons with other schools. Last year would suggest that some schools mark more generously than James Gillespies High School. How will James Gillespies High School and the SQA ensure assessment is as fair as possible? So a couple of the changes that will happen this year is that there is an intention to carry out more moderation. So there's a consistency of applied standards. Both Edinburgh Council are being tasked with ensuring there's consistency of approach across its 23 high schools. And in addition to that, the SQA has undertaken to apply another level of moderation nationally. So that should even that out. Yeah, I'm confident that will be something that we will learn from last year. I don't wish to be complacent, but I think it's an area that we did expend enormous time and energy. Primarily, it was Bob, my colleague, who carried out that exercise, supported by others. We were in lockdown, so it was work over many weeks and very detailed analysis, and predictions, and so on and so forth of work. We're in the fortunate position at Gillespies of having, generally, we have quite large departments. So we're in the position where we've got staff who can discuss, process, and get a deeper understanding of the standards. There are secondary schools in Edinburgh that have one-person departments where that exercise is very difficult, and that would have led to perhaps some inconsistency there in terms of interpretation of the standard. So we will be working more closely as schools in the city this year, so there's more consistency. And of course, the SQA then will ensure that consistency is more common nationally. Are there any other questions, Sarah, that you want to particularly raise?
No, well, I think that, I mean, there are a lot of very good questions there, and I think that was pointed out by somebody in the question amongst that we have got there. But on the knowledge that they are all going to be answered, perhaps this would be a good time to draw to a close, and then we can answer the questions later and put them on the Parent Council website as we announced. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. It also allows us, and one of the benefits of doing that is that we can go away and double check that the responses we're giving are actually the most up to date as well, and that's key. And indeed, the responses we place on the website will be the most up to date, because the situation is continually evolving and changing, and we're keen to make it as up to date as possible.
Okay, in that case, I think we'll just go to the close of the meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and thank you particularly Donald and Bob for being with us for the presentation and for answering our questions. The operation of assessments this year is an important issue of considerable concern to pupils and parents, where there has been a lot of uncertainty and late changes in plans, and as Donald has just said, ongoing changes, and it's a very much an evolving situation. So we're glad to have the opportunity at this point to hear from the school about what has happened and plans for what will happen. As always, we understand that definitive answers are not always possible, but we appreciate what you're doing to keep us informed. This is the final Parent Council meeting for 2020. We hope that our new style of online meetings has been useful for you all over the last few months. We will be in touch in the new year with our plans for meetings for the rest of the school year. 2020 has been a long and hard year for everybody, for pupils, for parents and carers, and for school staff. And we would like to once again thank everyone at the school for all their dedication and hard work in looking after our children, for keeping them safe and for providing them with an education through this difficult time. So on behalf of the Parent Council, can I wish you all a happy Christmas and send you our best wishes for the new year. Good night.